Would you attempt to make a garment that no longer exists? A mysterious make so obscure that nobody has attempted to make it in 350 years? It sounds crazy. It's probably impossible, but we're gonna try it anyway, in time for an event, which is in 2.5 weeks. This is the 1680s mantua that has captured my love. And while we do have extant mantuas, they're all from a decade or two later, which means this mantua is made differently than this mantua, just like this 1840s gown is made differently than this 1820s gown. This is a summer style, and to go along with that, I've picked this lovely striped block printed cotton, which is lightweight and perfect for a hot climate. And absolutely the wrong material for this project, which should really be made out of a nice, substantial silk. But that's hot. I'm really intimidated by this process. So before we get to the scary stuff, let's tackle something a little more palatable, the petticoat. We can make the educated assumption that it's constructed exactly the same as all the other petticoats were in this era. 2 rectangles, sewn and pleated. One of the things that drew me to this particular plate is the gorgeous play of stripes in the petticoat. It's such a simple technique and yet incredibly effective in providing visual interest. While they could be faced at the bottom, most petticoats were not fully lined, but for ease of piecing and for my sanity, we're gonna go ahead and line this with some cotton voile. I cut 2 rectangles the length of my waist to the tops of my feet. Then I did some questionable ratio calculations I'll spare you from to get the measurements for the vertical versus the horizontal stripes. I started by drawing a center line, then extended a diagonal from the center point out to each side to create the point and the V. For reasons you'll see later, I'm opting to not include my measurements here. If for some reason you're looking to recreate the specific look, just pick a height that you like and make sure you follow my advice. The main chunk of petticoat is horizontal stripes, which is in the direction of the selvage, but not actually on the straight grain, and this is going to trip me up the entire project. Because this was block printed by hand, they did not pay attention to the grain, and oh my god, why? Snip, 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 snip. Snip, 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 snip. Measure twice, cut once, folks. Don't be dumb like me. This will bite me in the ass later on. I swear I filmed the horizontal portion getting pieced on, but where is it? I don't know. But you're smart. You can easily imagine me basing the horizontal section down in preparation for the vertical section. And my look of abject horror when I realized that one of the side angles is 2 inches shorter than the other because I just drew freehand instead of folding and cutting it. Meanwhile, okay, this is my original mantua pattern that I took directly out of the Nora Waugh book, scaled it up to fit my waist size, altered slightly, and used to make my green mantua. Past Jackie was not kind to future Jackie. Shame on you, past Jackie. This mantua is dated from about 1700, so we can assume that it's probably good from, let's say, the mid-1690s through, let's say, 1705. Let's give it a 10-year window. We want 1680s, so we're gonna have to modify this design and simplify it a little bit using what we know. So what do we know about this mysterious garment? 1, they developed from something called a robe de chambre, which in today's terms refers to a bathrobe, but in the 17th century was a garment you wore informally in your bedroom to receive guests. Basically, they were the 17th century version of a tea gown. Robe de chambre and therefore early mantuas were cut in one piece, hem to hem, and sewn up the sides and along the arms. Likely the original method of pleating the mantua was just with a belt. 3, the T-shaped construction of the robe de chambre carried on into the next century with what we refer to as a wrapping gown. And these were, like many of the best things from this particular era, culturally appropriated from garments such as the Japanese kimono. This is the point in the video where we say vintage style, not vintage values, folks. 4, none of these garments exist anymore because they were all picked apart and turned into other things. Which means we don't really know what they actually looked like. All we have are the fashion plates, which weren't made for modern seamstresses to sit down and analyze. They were made for period mantua makers who knew what was going on already. But we can infer a few things both with our knowledge as well as looking at the fashion plate. First of all, notice that the closure is opposite the later garment, closed at the top and open at the waist instead of vice versa. I can see a definite sleeve seam. Also, there's no train, which makes sense because this is the woman walking in the countryside and nobody wants to drag a train through grass and ickier substances. Also, she's got a pimp cane and a cute little doggy. If anyone knows where I can find a pimp cane for cheap, let me know. With all that knowledge gathered in our noggins, let's try and draft a pattern. Let's start with the back, which should be easier. My theory is that the earlier mantuas probably had less cut shaping and more pleats, so we'll start by evening out the center back seam. Mark a fold line on your paper, then fold the pattern along that line. Then to tackle the side cutout, measure the distance between the side seam and the skirt side. Measure that distance away from your fold line on the paper. Then line up the old pattern with your line and redraw the rest of the side seam. The 18th century wrappers are all straight seamed, so to me, this seems like the most logical way to reverse engineer this garment. And then we need to add seam allowance, and the initial back is drafted. Onto the front. We'll start the same way as the back by evening out the slanted seams. Again, fold straight down and measure out from your markings. Note that in the front, I also added a couple extra inches for my bust, as well as the evening out distance since, well, you know why. Don't forget those pesky seam allowances. Note that to save paper, I'm only cutting out enough to hit slightly past my hips. It fits perfectly. Almost exactly half the width of this 45-inch fabric. Did I realize that my mic was dying through that last segment? No, I did not. Good job, Jax. Good job. Another change from the later mantuas is the straight skirt sides. Again, referring back to those earlier and later garments that are pretty much cut straight on the selvage. Can you see how that would make this so much easier to take apart and rework? I sure can. And I have all this fabric left over. Whee! That's gonna be enough to do the entire petticoat without piecing it. So I guess that means we can just get her serged and start hand sewing. Hi. Am I all dressed up? Yes, I am, because I'm going to a wedding this weekend and I needed to do a final test run of my bridesmaid's dress before the day. And it is a good thing I put it on before I packed it, y'all, because look, the bow is supposed to be right here. The bow is down by my ankles. It's supposed to be here. My stitching came out. Why is this relevant to the mantua? Because I'm gonna be out of state all weekend, which means I don't have a lot of time to work on this, and our promenade is next weekend. This means that tomorrow is the day that we've got to pleat the entire mantua, because it's the only day that I'm gonna be able to get into my bodies, and you need to have your structural undergarment on to fit the bodice. Originally, I was going to hand sew all of it to get it as historically adequate as we could given the materials we're using, but I wasn't counting on losing what was honestly a full 3 weeks of sewing time between the illness and trying to catch up on life after the illness. So we're gonna go ahead and do the hybrid method and use the machine for the side seams and the back seams, which aren't gonna be visible from the front. So the plan for this evening is to get the entire mantua assembled and ready to pleat tomorrow, after I resew the bow on this dress. Luckily, the actual assembly of a mantua is legit the easiest bit of the entire process. I'd even argue that a mantua is an incredibly simple gown with a huge margin for error that'd be a perfect introduction to 18th century dressmaking, if there were patterns. Maybe I'll change that. Anyway, thanks to my straightening of the edges, all we gotta do is straight seam the center back and sides, press our seams, and we can waffle over the weird shoulder bit. Okay, here's point E. It's got a ledge. Here's it on the other side. And we waffle a bit more and eventually get it pinned incorrectly. We are suited up and ready. Note that these bodies are from 1640 to 1660, so they are out of date for this particular period. The shape is slightly wrong, especially over the shoulders. We are wearing stays in the 1680s and the 1690s. I don't have a pair of those. They do take a really long time. I have a plan to make a pair of 1690s stays late this year after I finish a very big, very complicated project, which I have not announced. But these will do for now. This shape is pretty good. It's pretty similar to the other ones. It's mostly just the strap area, and it is kind of going to be annoying to have the side straps with the over the shoulder, but we'll deal with it. The hardest part of this is going to be the back because I don't have a fitting buddy. If you have a fitting buddy, this process is way easier, but I don't. So we are going to do what I did when I made my David Bowie English gown back in 2022 and pleat her down on the ironing board. Since my arms aren't detachable to pleat this on my body, let's take some measurements. First, the width of my back at the waist, not half of my waist measurement. Those are different numbers. Then the harder measurement, the width from shoulder to shoulder. The pleats will end slightly below the waist point. We'll start with an inverted box pleat at center back to mimic the slanted seam of the later mantuas. Remember that this is pure experimentation at this point, and I have no guideline for how these pleats are supposed to go. So I'm just using my knowledge of sewing and my body shape to guess in the most educated way possible. Nothing I do here today is gospel, and my goal here is not to have a perfect representation of the era, but to come as close as humanly possible with the information we currently have available. Okay, easy one's done, let's take care of the rest. Remember that the hot bod in the 80s was conical, so the pleats will be shallower at the top and deeper at the waist. You'll want to check your pleats against your measurements as you go. Quick fit check. Looks like I need to take an additional pleat right here at the waist. Initiate human pretzel mode. The front is much easier to pleat because it can be done on body, but much harder to film. Here's where we're at with the shoulder. From there, you can just follow those pleats down where they naturally fall against your body. Bonus of having to wear your bodies to do this, you can pin into them instead of your torso. There, that looks pretty good. Definitely see why these were belted though. Also kind of figured out the weird shoulder placement, point B, point E. Kind of goes back down the shoulder, I think. With that finalized, we can go ahead and finish the neck edge, first with a trapezoidal piece in the back. You sew it, flip it up, and fold it over. And then some straight pieces in the front to mimic the fashion plate. Look! I got my parasol today. Woo! All right, I know if you're superstitious, you're freaking out right now. I almost didn't get it. It was too big to fit in our lock boxes, and I talked to my mail lady the other day. She can't make it up to my floor. She was supposed to leave it at my friend's downstairs yesterday, and she didn't, and I freaked out. But she remembered today, we have our parasol. It looks really good. I'm really excited. It's 5 p.m. I just got done work. You know, the last thing I wanted to do was put these stays back on, but I didn't feel right finalizing all of my pleating in the front until I had a chance to see what it looked like with the edging. It looks pretty good. Last night, I went ahead and tacked down the center front completely with a prick stitch, and then I have all of the rest of the back pleats basted down. Typically, these weren't tacked all the way down, so you could take it off and readjust it if you needed to really quick. But I was getting a lot of pulling, especially right in the center back, and I think it's just, this fabric is so lightweight, it just doesn't have enough body. So the pleats in the center back are permanently tacked down, and I'm gonna leave it that way. We'll see how it behaves once I get the strip of fabric in there on the inside. If the other pleats, after I take the basting out, are bubbling again, I'm just gonna go ahead and tack them down. So I leave for the airport tomorrow at 9:30 a.m. and I've got a lot to do. So I think this outfit and you are gonna be coming with me to the wedding. We'll see how much I can get done this evening. Here's a strip of fabric. This gets placed on the inside near the waist, and you'll want to tack each pleat down to the strip, leaving the rest of it loose. I had every intention of filming during the wedding. I brought everything with me, and the only time I ended up having to sew was on the plane. And I didn't film because it'd be like this. What I did sew was the bottom horizontal section of the petticoat. painstakingly matching stripes on the diagonal while sitting on a moving plane with only a tiny bit of space on the tray table because my dumb butt didn't properly measure the fabric before I cut it. Lesson learned. But hey, I did a darn tootin' good job on that stripe matching. Also notice that the sides are not the same width, and the entire thing on this panel is too long for the lining. Now you know why I didn't give you measurements. But we shall not be deterred, for this petticoat is very thin and will actually benefit from folding the top edge over to give more volume to the pleating. Speaking of which, I started off the hard way, doing it by hand in order to perfectly match the stripes. It soon dawned on me, however, that it was going to be difficult to do it that way and get the width that I needed. So I took it out and transitioned to what you probably know is the smarter method with such lovely, evenly spaced, tiny stripes, cartridge pleating, which is actually accurate, even if I originally thought this fabric would be too thin to hold them. I want to say thank you to all of my contributors over on Ko-fi. Your continued support, no matter how small, helps to keep this channel running and allows me to delve further into the depths of the 17th century, where so few have gone before. It's especially important in the mix like this, the experiments, the sartorial archaeology, if you will. I've linked below if you'd like to contribute, but otherwise, even just watching the video, hitting the thumbs up button, and saying hello in the comments helps me out a huge amount and buys me a new microphone. So, thanks for being here. One and done. Back to the gown with sparkly nail polish. Ooh! After reflection, all the back pleats are going to be prick stitched down to help support the flimsy fabric. Let's make a stomacher. I was worried about sizing, so I made it larger than the one for my green gown, but otherwise this is fast, easy, and simple. Here are the finished strips tacked to the inside waist. Nice and solid. Okay, we are officially secured. So let's get a hemming. One thing I forgot to do in my haste was flip down the direction of the side seam part of the way down. This is because of the way it's bustled in the back. The inside becomes the outside. Similarly, the center front edge will have to be flipped in the opposite direction at the same point. It's kind of tricky. A bolder person might clip the seam to get it to lay flatter. All right, my little thread bunnies, we are T-minus 3 days till the event. What do we have left to do? We have to hem the bottom of the mantua. We have to hand dye and prepare the belt and the ribbons. We have to sew the waistband onto the petticoat, trim the bottom of the petticoat and hem it, and everybody's favorite step of the sleevils. This pattern already comes with a sleeve. This is the sleeve, but it is very much a turn of the century Mantua sleeve and not a 1680s Mantua sleeve. However, we're gonna be a little bit cheeky about this because it is quite clear in the fashion plate that this is a pedal sleeve. You know what else has a pedal sleeve? Our favorite 1890s shirtwaist pattern, Laughing Moon number 103. That's right, my friends, we're time traveling 210 years into the future. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to assemble this sleeve in my particular size. We're gonna Franken pattern them together, do a quick mock-up. Here are the two sleeves laid side to side. Basically the same size? This is cut on the bias, but that wasn't really a thing yet. Honestly, I have no issue with it. I think it looks fine. It's hard to see it because of the pleating. Obviously, I don't have my stays on, so my body shape is a little bit different. Apart from the shoddy gathering I did up here, which we'll rectify when we do the actual sleeve, I think it's good to go. Opting to line the sleeve here to help keep the shape defined. The confusing bit of this is that the curvy end is the sleeve edge, not the arm side. To bustle up the back, I'm going to use this large historical hook from B&T left over from my mullet stays. Then I'll attach some random lobster claw clasps to the sides of the front skirt. My green mantua has loops and buttons, but I had a hard time keeping the skirts up with that method, so this, while less HA, is going to be much more secure. We'll tuck the hook into the center back pleat to keep it hidden and sew through all layers for security. Hi! It is now several days after the event, and I have to announce to you, I didn't get it done in time. I only managed to sew the binding on one side of the stomacher. The ribbons and belt were cut, but I didn't have time to hem them, and I totally forgot to hem the bottom of the freaking gown. But you know what? I wore it anyway, and it was fine. However, after wearing it for an afternoon in the heat, I've decided to make a couple of changes. I don't think it is 100% flattering on me right now, and I suspect it's because I made the stomacher bigger than this stomacher, and I think I want to change the shape just a little. Because if you look at the fashion plate, it actually looks like her stays are bodies and it has tabs. So we're gonna add tabs, we're going to hem the ribbons, and hem the gown. Does this look like a tooth to anyone else? Now we've got to adjust these two boning channels. Yay. Here's the finished twofers, I mean stomacher. And you know, this bit. The front panels are hemmed to the outside, but the back panels are hemmed to the inside. Confused yet? One thing I'm not going to change before we get to the reveal, but I'm seriously considering changing later, is adding a lining to the front panel. This fabric truly was the wrong fabric for this project, and it's just so flimsy that I'm not getting a very nice line, especially around the bust. It's just floppy. It's one of those things where it could go either way. Is it going to be worth taking apart all of that hand stitching and adding the voile in? I don't know. It's done, and now we can take a breather and relax a little bit. And hey, I've got a ton of 17th century content on this channel, and I'd love for you to check out another video. So please take a look at this playlist and see if anything catches your fancy. Thanks for watching. I love y'all, and I'll catch you in my next video. Oh, that was a mess. If anyone knows where I can get a pimp chain. What's a pimp chain? Pimp cane. Pimp cane. Pimp cane. Why am I having such a hard time with that phrase? Probably because those are two words that probably should never come out of my mouth.